This week is the season 1 finale of the Converge Pod. Thank you all so much for listening and for your feedback and your comments. It has really been so much fun to put this out into the world, and I can't wait for season 2. This week, I'm chatting with konverjdans artistic director, choreographer, dancer, lovebug, and my best friend, Tiffany Mangulabnan. You're so cool. Stay right there. I got something to prove. And we're recording.
We're recording!
Yay!
Yay!
Is it really Friday though?
It's Friday.
Oh my god.
Oh god.
It doesn't feel like a Friday. That's crazy.
Well, we have rehearsal tomorrow.
Yes, we do. And we just got back from rehearsal for your piece.
Yes.
How do you feel like it went today?
I feel like it went really well.
Mhm.
I was a little nervous because we had only 2 hours.
Mhm.
And there were all these different things I wanted to touch, like your solo,
Had lots of plans.
your old solo, your new solo, Amy and Antoine into the group stuff, Łukasz and Antoine's duet,
Mhm.
Amy's duet with the ghost of Giovanna, who wasn't in
The
rehearsal
ghost of
today.
Giovanna.
But it was really cool because, we had the plan before and everybody on the team played their part and learned things on the side, reviewed things,
Mhm.
did things while I worked with you and vice versa. So
Yeah.
I mean, it went really well.
Yay! Me too. It was fun. Did you do a lot of adjustments to your original vision between November and now? Or like, I don't know, what have the past few months been like in the context of the piece?
Yes, that's a good question. I guess in November, it felt like a very, very short, like contracted process.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt more like, I got the music from Bradley. It was 5 minutes, and I was reading and allowing myself to be inspired by this Rilke poem that I've read to all of you, and I just sort of, it felt like almost like a vomiting out of an idea of a first draft that then we performed like right away, and now I've been able to sit with the ideas, the poetry, the music, the choreography, and I think a lot of it is already changing, even though we've had maybe 2-3 rehearsals for it. The prologue with your silent solo, I think, I guess what I'm trying to do now is find a story in it. It felt a little bit more like movement choreography with, Bradley's beautiful music before. And now I'm like, what are the characters? Who are these people? What is my character? Inside joke. But it's important, to give something to someone who doesn't know, like if someone never read that poem, like how can I convey that feeling anyway? And some kind of story for someone who's watching it to hold on to.
So talk to me about the poem, I guess. What is the poem? How did you find it?
Well, I was reading, I guess somebody I was dating at the time was reading a lot of Rilke poetry. And I looked through his book, The Book of Hours, and
Hours with an H or an O?
Hours, Hours.
Okay. Just curious.
The Book of Hours. It's the collection of Rilke poetry that they're love poems. I guess they're called love poems to God, but they don't feel religious. They're spiritual. They don't feel religious. I think there was one reviewer or blurb writer who wrote that the collection of these love poems to God feels like the most secular you can get to like writing to God. I think he writes to God, but it's really to, I think of it as like to the universe or to the energy that is like in all of us. I feel like
maybe
that's
a more general definition of God.
God.
Yeah.
Like whatever that means to you, whoever, whatever that is to you. So I guess the poem, what the lines I can like recite from it. It starts out with, in deep nights I dig for you like treasure, for all I have seen in um, in my life is poor and paltry substitute for the beauty of you that has not happened yet. And that's the first stanza, and then it goes into these images of, I hold my hands open to the wind so they can branch out like a tree. They're bloody from digging, like the digging, and I keep thinking, and we do this a lot in this
in the
piece. We're like digging through the sky, but also around us into like invisible walls, and then also you start crawling and we dig into the floor. And so what are we digging for? It's like digging for meaning and everywhere, and I feel like everyone has a moment of like digging into their duet partner, digging on themselves, and you're digging, 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 and at the end of the poem he says, what do I feel falling on this parched earth, falling softly like a spring rain. He says falling softly now. I think now is important there because I think it shows like a journey of like it wasn't there before, and then suddenly the sky opens,
Yeah,
or
like
shatters,
brings you present again from
And
whatever winding. Yeah,
we're wandering, winding, digging, searching, like chaotic, confused space that we were in before, and suddenly the sky bursts open and you're like, oh right, it's rain. Or something.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And I know you get a lot of inspiration from literature. You bring a lot of, like, the seeds of your ideas, I feel like, come from what you're reading for the most part. I know there's other things, but
yes, mostly yes.
What year, 2019, when we did the James Baldwin piece, that was also a poem, but I know you were very deeply steeped in like all of his novels at the time. So from what you're reading, and this year it's a poem, like does that shape the way you approach the structure of the piece? Like, I guess Baldwin felt almost narrative to me, and I know there was like spoken words that we were actually dancing to, and there's not this year, but this one feels more abstract and stanza-ish, but I'll stop putting my ideas on it.
No,
but
but
like the structure, I guess, of what you're reading.
You're right. Actually, thank you. I've never thought of that.
Okay.
But it is actually really that's accurate, because actually the Baldwin speech wasn't a poem, but his speech that he gave
it was a speech
in a church in New York in 1963 or 62. And so it was this speech with, I mean, you heard it. If anyone saw Nobody Knows Our Names, they heard it, and it was like this beautiful cadence, like this rhythm that I thought, we have to move to this. I have to move to this. And we had the real Mike Wilson, like weave his amazing hip hop music through it. And I feel like because that one was a speech, in a way there was a narrative, like we followed, like it felt very much like scenes. Like I think I made scenes for us to dance within. Like you were this stanza of the speech was your solo, and Amy got this solo, and I had this solo, and it was all part of a stanza. So we were like maybe vignettes.
Yeah.
And then I was just thinking that last summer, in August in Raleigh, when I choreographed for Carolina Ballet in North Carolina, I was inspired by Virginia Woolf's essay, The Death of the Moth. And even though that's an essay, it's just this like 4-page essay that's like the story of Virginia Woolf watching this moth basically live out his life, his existence along her window pane, dancing, zigzagging back and forth. She literally wrote that. I was like, oh, she's giving me everything to choreograph.
You're like, she said dancing.
Like,
this is a
zigzagging.
dance.
This is exactly what's going into the piece. So that the piece in North Carolina felt to me like a story. Like the moths entered, and Jason Piscasio, who I was very inspired by, former like ballet Philippines dancer who I know from the Philippines, he was the moth, and in the end he died. So that was a story. And now, yeah, you're right. Like now, for the first time, I'm working from a piece of poetry which doesn't have a story. It's not a speech. It doesn't really have a narrative. And I guess that's why this feels more abstract.
Yeah, and you've choreographed so many pieces for Converjdans now, and I feel like you like clicked with choreography very quickly, and like you've
Mhm.
kind of made a piece for Converge Dance every year almost since we started,
Right.
basically. But, or I guess after we stopped choreographing as collectively
Mhm.
as we used to in the
Right,
early
that's true.
days. Which I also guess is
Yeah.
something I haven't really talked about yet, but I guess
Right.
talk a little bit about the transition that I can chime into between choreographing like collectively, where we were like an
Mm.
AJT hive mind,
Mhm.
and then like when you first had like Tiffany's voice on stage for the first
Right.
time. Like, was it scary, or like the trust in
Yes,
yourself? Do you remember?
I do actually. And I remember significantly having a conversation, having coffee, maybe a glass of wine with Moreau,
Mhm.
who directs New Chamber Ballet and who's
Mhm.
a friend and I feel like kind of mentor, advisor to Converge Dance.
Mhm.
Um, and at that time, he had seen us he had come to like all our early studio showings
Yeah,
and
yeah.
seen all the AJT
Mhm.
collaborative Amy Jordan Tiffany choreography pieces
Mhm.
and said, while it's a note, like I applaud your effort and your willingness to like collaborate with each other,
Yeah.
that he said, I think it would also be great to see each of you just like follow your own vision without having to compromise because someone
Mhm.
else thought this or this or this.
Mhm.
And I think it was after that conversation that I said, okay, I think I want to make a piece this year, and that
Yeah.
was Walls.
Yeah, Walls was
And
first.
the Walls was my first one for Converge,
Mhm.
and I don't know, it was really exciting. We had Hank Mason create like an original musical track for us. And I think at that time, because I don't think I had figured out what exactly my choreographic voice was.
Mhm.
I felt very just inspired by what I was dancing to. Right.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
dancing with Emery Lacrone dance.
Mhm.
And I think I took a lot of inspiration from her movement and the way she structures
Mhm.
pieces. So I feel like the first pieces were very much like, okay, this is what I'm influenced by. So let me try my version of that.
Yeah, it's almost like learning how to walk or talk or something. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, let me copy what I'm seeing other people
Right.
do until I find my own legs and I can like kind of say what I actually
Yes.
mean to
Yeah.
say. Like, I think I kind of felt that too, where the first few
Yeah.
pieces were very like, you can watch, but this isn't like exactly representative of like me,
Right,
you know,
right,
but I
right.
have to get these out to at least
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
move down the path.
Mhm.
So, but I've always
Yeah, that makes
loved
sense.
Walls, and as a dancer in it or like a spectator of it too,
Mm.
I always felt it was very Tiffany at first, so it was very like you. So maybe that's the feeling we just have about our own work, and it doesn't actually translate that way.
Interesting.
But I mean, obviously work grows, but
Mhm.
you know what I mean.
It's funny we bring up Walls because earlier in rehearsal, and maybe yesterday with Giovanna and Antonino, the first movement of Sky Shattered, the piece we're working on now, I have the dancers weaving in and out in diagonal lines, and I got this deja vu flashback to Walls,
Yeah.
where I don't know if you remember where we were 6 dancers. It was Peter Chang, Wokash, and Blake, and we wove like diagonally across the floor doing tour jeté, something something fouette,
Oh my
something
gosh.
something.
I remember,
this.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I was looking at Antoine, Wokash, and Amy working on the opening phrase today, and I was like, wait, this looks like Walls,
like,
but it,
am I
you know,
back?
but I'm
No,
like,
it's different.
but it's nice to
Yeah.
have that, like, oh, that's back.
Mhm.
I like that, like moving across the floor, weaving in and out that
Yeah.
way. So
Yeah. So what has the progression of, I don't know, your choreographic voice been? Or how do you feel different in the choreographic process?
Okay.
Like how you enter a room. Like how did you enter the room on day one of Walls?
Oh, yeah, that very uncertainly. I think, oh my gosh, when I think back to that, it was 2017. So it felt like very like baby steps into it. But it also felt very safe because I remember that first day it was you, me, and Amy. And I came in with, I remember a picture from something where somebody was like this. And I thought we just have to get to this
Yeah.
moment, and I think it was something like this.
Yeah, there was so
covering
much
your
of like
hands.
this in those very
Yeah,
early
because
rehearsals.
there was an image I found
There's
that
also like a first draft performance we had. There was a lot of this, but anyways,
yes,
yeah.
when we opened for Gleich Dances, it was just the three of us.
Yeah.
And I guess since then I've continued to be inspired and allowed myself to be influenced by choreographers I work with and admire. Mostly the women choreographers I've been so lucky, or we've been so lucky to work with, like Emery that first year. And then I started working with Gabrielle Lam, and we've always worked with Kylie Kwan since 2016. And so I feel like these three female choreographer voices, Emery's, Gabrielle's, and Kylie's, were there at the beginning for me and have probably stayed because I love all of their work, all the vocabulary, and they're all so different too. So I think finding myself, and I've danced for all of them and all their pieces, and so finding like what makes sense to me when I dance their movement, and then how that translates to my movement vocabulary. But I guess that's talking a little bit more about movement vocabulary.
Sure.
And I think the progression of like structuring a piece, that doesn't feel. I think of when I think of the word progression, it feels like this like linear thing, but it doesn't feel linear because I think I've gone back and forth between the more abstract and the more traditionally like structured kind of pieces, and then also just the weirder, like going into more experimental, like weird spaces, which I know you didn't see the piece I made for Barnard at the end of 2022, but I feel like that was pretty weird structurally. To the point where I questioned it, like, this is such a weird piece. This doesn't make sense. But it also sort of did. And I think that was okay. So I guess I'm still like experimenting with structure, but I feel more confident about my movement vocabulary. So I guess that's the way it's evolved. Probably.
Yeah. What's the traditional structure you're referring to, or you feel like you're working from?
Maybe traditional in terms of ballet, neoclassical ballet, and even contemporary ballet, like the things that we're used to seeing on a bigger stage. Even the Joyce, although they do go into like weirder spaces. But I think coming from like, I'm thinking of the Barnard piece, like coming from an idea, like I was thinking of a turtle shell. No, a sea turtle's nest like hatching from the ocean, and that's how I started this piece. And then my dancers were all in pointe shoes and like crawling away from the middle of the shell to like be weird turtles around the stage. And at first, some of them, the more classical ones, were like, this feels really weird and awkward.
Yeah.
And I watched them like feel weird about it and then sink into it. And I thought, oh, I'm making them do really weird things. This is weird. This looks weird, but I like it. And it's not traditional in the sense that, I don't know, that we both grew up with. New York City Ballet, the Philippine Ballet Theater, Ballet Next, like, just more traditional kind of, this is how we present a piece and present the dancers. I guess.
Have you felt yourself wanting to, or I guess in the pieces you've created since that Barnard work, have you been like, let's go back to that weird place? Or was it just something that like came out and you're like, okay, there was that. I'm going to keep going forward? Or
no, I think I want to keep exploring the weird. Inserting it in there, not for the sake of weirdness,
right,
but where it feels natural, and then not shying away from it if an idea that seems quote unquote weird comes.
Yeah.
And I guess that's reminding me a little bit about something that Bradley Harris, the composer who's making this piece for us, said. We were talking about like experimental avant-garde modern jazz or music that's experimental, and how he doesn't believe that all music like to be good or interesting in this day and age needs to be that, that esoteric kind of experimental thing that no one except like musicians and dancers and artists can hang on to.
Yeah.
It's like there's still good music to be made in music that's accessible. So sort of bridging the gap and just being honest about what you're creating. And so I've been thinking about that too, in terms of weirdness, I guess, in choreography.
Yeah, totally. As we're in this like weird versus traditional, I guess, kind of topic here, you're still working in the point shoe every day. You bring it into your choreography. You're still dancing on point in a way that Amy and I don't really play with in our choreography anymore. But I guess what attracts you about the point shoe or the...
I just think that I still love the way it looks and feels, that like lengthened, that like heightened height and that lengthened length.
Yeah,
that
like
you
the
get
extra
from a
like
shoe.
ugh.
The extra something and the extra like lift you need in order to be on the box. And I think that there's something about the opposition and the contrast of that length and the gooey, like grounded being in the floor that we also love to explore. But I love that opposition. And I guess I like hang on to the fact that the three of us are like very classically trained, like ballet dancers, who have like very strong technique. And so without getting, and I don't think any of us are stuck in like our classical ballet technique. It's like, I think I'm interested in how do we use that like amazing technique that we all like grew up like working so hard on and dancing for New York City Ballet, Suzanne Farrell, Philippine Ballet Theater. We used that technique to dance with these companies, and then like how does that extend? Like if we keep lengthening and heightening it, like it extends into the floor, into the everywhere else. And I think that interests me, maybe because I feel like it's a different space than, because there's like ballet and then there's like contemporary, but I don't feel like I'm like, honestly, if I'm honest with myself, and that's not my training. Like I'm not a contemporary dancer,
Right.
but I'm no longer a principal with a Philippine Ballet Theater. That's my background, but like it's somewhere now in between. But I don't want to kind of be wishy-washy in between. I want to like really merge them and see what comes out there.
Yeah,
I guess.
I love that. And it's kind of funny this season because, the three of us were very classically trained, and the other three dancers we have this season, Giovanna, Antoine, and Łukasz, are all from the Ailey School, which...
That's so true.
It's just funny. Like, we've had a fair few dancers in and out, but this season we have like three from the Ailey BFA program. And I guess I feel like they do bring this very like grounded. Like other vocabulary, other world into all of our work. But I guess sticking with yours, with that idea of kind of bridging the gaps, do you feel like they bring different, I don't know, different elements to your work that like Amy and I don't? Or, I mean, everyone does, because we're all just different dancers. And I think that's like the crux of converge dance. We like work with individuals wherever they're at, broken toes and everything. But I guess just because we have these three from the Ailey School and there's kind of this similarities between them, like, do you feel that? Or
yes, definitely. And I love those differences and how we, it's funny because even though you and Amy and I are very different,
right, our backgrounds are different too,
also
but,
different, but they're like the same in that it was a very classical ballet point shoe world, and then we started at different rates exploring the
different things,
weirder, gooey contemporary things.
But
and I feel like Antoine, Łukasz, and Giovanna, while all funneling through Ailey, are also all very different dancers. The three of them. And even just today and yesterday, like working on Amy and Giovanna's new duet, like even the way they did that unison section falling to the floor floating is like very different, and there was something about Giovanna's groundedness or release that I thought, okay, like we can work on that and get that feeling for Amy too. And then today there was something where Antoine was like, question, should this swivel thing be like a Horton? And then he just went into this Horton swivel and the whole room was like, well, that looks good. Let's all try.
Like that one.
Let's all try to do that. You know,
Yeah.
and it's like, you know, and it's Horton training, which we don't have.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's great because then the possibilities are expanded and you see it on someone's body and like, okay, let's all work towards this because that looks great and it's something my body wouldn't have done naturally.
Yeah. And that's just like the beauty of collaboration and like how we work in the studio together. But I guess how do you feel that your collaborations with musicians, even with Reshma, our costume designer, or even just the books you read, like how does that expand your process?
I mean, it's like it's everything, I guess, because
it is everything.
Right?
I agree.
It's everything.
Yeah.
it's like the basis. I
Yeah.
don't know that I can create dance or movement from nothing. And maybe there are instances for that, for people, for other choreographers, dance creators, performance artists, but I think for me to have the impulse to create a dance or a solo or a full piece, there has to be the other thing that inspires it first, whether it's the Virginia Woolf essay, which actually I landed on through Ravel's Noctuelle, which means moth, and then so in those cases
so it was music
first, found the essay, then it became all about the essay. Or like with Walls, like that wall, when Hank made that music, I remember it was like just the beginning.
It was a wall of sound.
It was a wall of sound. He was like, so I created a wall of sound, and I was like, I love it.
We're all just like, boom.
And it was like, and then that's where it came from.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, let's think about walls, and the whole piece was about walls in my head. I don't know if that came out, but yeah. I guess with Reshma, it's a little different because she comes in and she weaves her magic through our ideas that are already half made. But she definitely plays a big part in influencing us, especially when, you know, we start a Pinterest board to show her what we're thinking costume-wise. And then I love that she makes her own twin Pinterest board that looks a little bit like ours, but has taken it also in like one branch of a different direction.
Yeah.
Or like several.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's where she's going with this. Okay. And then you see it and let that influence you too. So yeah, I think the collaborative part, that crossing, is really the seed for me, whether literature or music or something.
Yeah. And you've converged.
Converged.
You've choreographed most of your work for Converge Dance so far, but I feel like the last year especially, you've had a lot of opportunities to choreograph with some pretty cool institutions, like two that you've mentioned, Barnard, the students at Barnard. You also got to do a piece on Carolina Ballet. I guess as you're kind of stepping out here, I know there have been other pieces too, but how does it feel different to be in process with dancers that you don't know as well? Because I find so much comfort in stepping into the studio knowing, like, you know, like, it's my girls, it's my people. Like, I know what you're going to bring. I know what I'm going to bring, how I'm going to help shape everything. But how have you approached new processes, new spaces, and still bringing yourself along?
I guess I've tried to approach it in the same way that, and I think in this, and maybe we're very influenced by Gabrielle Lamb, who I think even in the way, when she meets a new person, a new dancer, we have like,
sorry, there was a
lots
bug on
of
me.
plants
I was
and
like,
bugs here.
Not to interrupt your question, I'm sorry, or your answer.
Your question? Do you have a question?
Your question. But anyway, being in the studio with dancers that aren't Converge.
Yes. I was thinking, okay, so I have to think back to the first time I had so it was Dance Lab New York when I was
Mhm.
like stuck in the Philippines, and they gave me a virtual week.
Mhm.
And it was the first time I was gonna have 8 dancers at my disposal, although virtually,
Mhm.
um, 6 hours a day for a week. And I freaked out a little bit about that schedule, and I wrote to Gabrielle
Mhm.
because I know that she has so much experience, like with long days, long hours, residencies, things like that. And I
Right.
was like, so how do you get through that?
Yeah.
What do you do? And her advice was just, make a schedule, like
Mm.
carve out like the hours, hour by hour for yourself, what you're going to do and the dancers you're going to use, and tell them from the beginning.
Mhm.
So that really helps, especially when it's not. I mean, I bring that into Converge too. We try to do
Yeah.
that with Converge dance, but especially when they're new people. I think it really helps to have some structure, and then within those frames, those hours, giving yourself time to sort of get to know the dancers. So I think it's nice to either like start with some improv building things with them just to see how what they move like, what their impulses
Mhm.
are,
Mhm.
or even starting with a phrase off the
Mm.
bat to see like who feels comfortable in what kind of thing,
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of getting to know on the first day, getting to know those dancers. But I don't know. I really love it. It's a lot of fun branching out and
Mhm.
getting to meet new humans and work with like different bodies who have like different movement senses.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it like feeds you choreographically too, because there is something about being comfortable, but not in a bad way, with a company that's familiar to us, the one we created,
Right.
and then going to see other dancers. It's just like new bodies in your work. I'm sure
Mhm.
is very inspiring in that way,
Very
especially
inspiring.
student versus professional
Yes.
and all that,
Yes.
all that stuff.
Mhm.
But
And I have to shout out to Carolina Ballet's Jason Piscasio, who just retired.
mhm.
Jason is like one of the most beautiful dancers ever. I already thought that of him when he was at Ballet Philippines
Mhm.
years ago. But he, I kind of like sneaky wrote some at Carolina Ballet like, so Jason and I know each other from 17 years ago. Can I please have him in my piece? Even though I know I can't ask for
Uh-huh.
certain dancers. He's a principal there. He might have been too busy.
Uh-huh.
And they gave me him in my piece. He was one of the 6 dancers. And I think that gave me, I was pretty nervous about the Carolina Ballet gig. I felt like, oh my God, this is so big.
Mhm.
What am I doing?
Mhm.
And then, but having Jason as an anchor,
Yeah.
we immediately like fell back into like speaking in Tagalog, which I feel like neither of us ever get to do
Yeah.
that much. And like joking around together and then that felt like home, like
Yeah.
creating on him and his, Carolina Ballet is very like Balanchine classical, but
Mhm.
Jason did so much modern dance in the
Right.
Philippines. So I knew with him I could lean into
Yeah.
all of that range.
Yeah.
And that was really great. And then, but the other dancers were beautiful and very inspiring as well. I got to do something a little bit more classical,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
Very
Yeah.
fun. I do want to go back to the Philippines because I often forget that you had this whole like other life where you were a principal dancer with the Philippine Ballet Theater. And that's just like so wild to me because my journey to Converge Dance was like school, apprenticeship, freelance company, Converge Dance. So it was like it felt still very like early in my career, I guess, that I fell into Converge Dance,
Yeah.
which is weird to think about because that's just weird to think about. But you had like a whole ballerina career where you what
Yeah.
status titles, whatever you want to call it. But I guess just talk about your time dancing with the Philippine Ballet Theater, your
Yeah.
journey to
Right.
Swan Lake, or
The journey to Swan Lake, yeah, that was like the height of my classical ballet career. But yeah, gosh, the Philippine Ballet Theater was most of my life in the
Yeah.
Philippines. Like, my mom put me into that school when I was 7 years old,
Mhm.
and I just stayed with that school until they threw me into productions. I mean, this is crazy, but because I'm so tall, I'm taller than everybody in the Philippines. When I was 10 years old,
Mhm.
I was almost the same height as most of the corps de ballet dancers,
So
the
funny.
apprentices in the company who are like
Uh-huh.
16, like
Yeah.
apprentice age. And they were desperate for an extra corps dancer for Don Quixote. And I was 10. I was almost 11. There's a photo of me on Facebook. I look like a little shrimp, like with my shoulders up and like fear on my face in that line of
I
the,
love the
you know,
photos
it's the
so much.
dream scene, and she's the dryad queen.
Yeah,
She
sure.
like she's in a beautiful, it's Guada de Leon, and she's like in this beautiful grand jeté, and you see me like tiny Tiffany.
10
But
years
10
old.
years old, and I didn't know how to do a ballet.
Oh my
And they were
goodness.
like, okay, let's teach her how to do ballet for the ballet section.
Oh my gosh, that is
Um,
such a story.
It's
Such
crazy.
a beginning.
It's crazy. I just got like thrown into it, and they were like, okay, she sort of did okay. Well, and then I just kept going.
Mhm.
And from 10, 11 until I was 15, I was like sort of still in the school, sort of apprentice, and then becoming an apprentice, and was in the corps for like all of the ballets for La Bayadere, Romeo and Juliet, Swan Lake, Don Quixote, like Esmeralda, like everything that we did every year, Nutcracker. And then I signed my first contract when I was 15. So yeah, when I think about it, it's like I have been dancing professionally for like 18 years now, or 19
Yeah.
years now or something. It is really crazy to think about. I took a little break from the company when I was 17, and I like 16, 17. I think it was overwhelming, and I got a little burnt out for a while. I don't really talk about this, but there was a summer when I was 16 when I wasn't dancing, and I did like a cheerleading thing in my high school.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know this. I didn't know we would get
It
new
was
Tiffy
like-
stories.
It was like a hardcore, like boot camp to get
Oh my
on the
gosh.
team.
Yeah.
And I have to say that the cheerleading thing in the Philippines is like, it's very serious. They call it hardcore, and it's not like these cheerleading teams just are like formed to cheer on a sport.
Okay.
It's its own sport. And it's very
Okay.
competitive. Like the University of the Philippines had a very, I don't know if they still do it, but they had a very competitive, like super impressive, everyone amazing dancers, and then also gymnasts. And they would do the craziest like lifts, like the men would do,
Yeah.
So it was a very competitive
wow.
thing. And I was getting into that one summer until, the end of it, I realized like, oh yeah, I need to be dancing.
Yeah.
So then brief stint at Ballet Philippines, Lions Ballet for the summer, and I think that's when my brain was like, okay, I definitely want to go abroad someday. But yeah, I guess I just stayed, became a principal, and did some lead roles, and then realized once again that I wanted to break out and keep challenging myself and come here.
Yeah. What brought you to New York?
Just that continued like thirst for more challenge, more something. I think also the adventure of moving to a new city and like meeting 100,000 more like different crazy artists and people, and falling in love with new people. So it wasn't all just dance, but I also felt, I became a principal when I was 20 there. And I guess is that young in like classical ballet world?
I don't know
Sometimes
anymore,
not.
but I
don't
want to
know
say
anymore.
yes.
Maybe. But I felt very young about it, even though I was one of the most senior dancers in the company, and I know there were younger dancers in the company who looked up to me and who I was helping out. I always helped our ballet master Anatoly Panashukov with like rehearsal directing. I was sort of an unofficial rehearsal assistant too, because I just always sort of had that kind
brain.
of brain. Like I knew the counts, I knew the formations, I always knew what was going on for everybody. And I would like teach company classes if one of the ballet masters or the director wasn't available. It fell on me. So I had all this like responsibility and these like roles already, like principal dancer, like slash rehearsal assistant slash like sub to
Yeah.
teach company
Yeah.
class when I was 19, 20, 21, and felt
Incredibly young.
incredibly young for all of those
Yeah.
things. And I loved it, and I
Mhm.
loved the company. I like miss those days and that camaraderie. But I also started to feel like I needed new people to push me.
Mhm.
There was so much I learned from all of the people I worked with in the Philippines, both at Ballet Philippines and the Philippine Ballet Theater. But I just started to feel like, oh, maybe like they trust me so much, like they gave me all that responsibility
Right.
that they're not pushing me as much anymore.
Yeah.
Like they know I can do this thing, this and this, and I was, and I love like Ron Hainario is the director of the Philippine Ballet Theater, and we have a very special relationship because he was my teacher when I was 7 in the school there, and while he was a principal. And for a while, I was a bit of his muse. Like if there was a ballet he was going to create, like I was like, it like started
Yeah.
with me, and
Yeah.
that was a beautiful relationship. But again, it was someone who knew me since I was 7, who sort of
Right.
like brought me up in dance. And
Right.
as sad as it felt to leave, I was like, I think I need to like
It's
feel what it's like to
necessary.
have new eyes on me who like don't know me and trust me, and
Yeah.
whom I have to really, really push
Yeah.
for. And like, and then I got that here,
Yeah.
starting with Michelle. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was like home, the
Mhm.
Philippine Ballet Theater was home.
Mhm.
And with all the comforts and love and
Yeah.
family of that, it
Yeah.
just felt like I needed to
Mhm.
break out of the comfort of that.
Yeah. What's it like to go back and visit?
Oh, it's beautiful.
Mhm.
It's gotten easier. I think when I first used to go back and visit, I had all these like insecurities about like, well, I should have, I left, so I should have like made it to like
Yeah, it's
this,
like I
and
should come home with
with like
bearing gifts or
yeah,
fruits or
right. And
something. Just,
I'm like the star of this something, and
Yeah.
none of that was happening in the beginning. I was just like doing my freelance thing here, as you know.
Yeah.
And I come back and be like, hi, I'm
Yeah.
back. But I've sort of like owned that more in the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years,
Yeah.
probably since starting Converge Dance, because
Yeah.
it feels like this is our thing,
Mhm.
and we're still freelancing, of course,
Mhm.
but I feel more in the last 5 years or something, feel more like
Yeah.
I have ownership over my life and my career in New York, and I
Yes.
can go home and feel like really proud. And they have me teach company class at the Philippine Ballet Theater, teach and take class with them when I go home,
Yeah.
and that's always really nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, because there is such ballet companies are typically structured in a hierarchy, even if they're not a ranked company or if it's an unranked company, there's still this like very clear kind of pecking order. And then
Mhm.
when you leave and you enter the freelance world in New York, and it's kind of like there's just this vast ocean that you kind of have to
Yeah.
find your people and like make connections and build bridges, and it's a lot of work and it's so rewarding, but it doesn't really, at least at the beginning, it doesn't feel like it bears these same like bravura accolades
Right.
as classical ballet companies do. And I
Mhm.
only say that because going back into that environment, kind of with that mindset, is so difficult to kind of like, I left this place that's very comfortable. I went and tried something new, which is something to be proud of on its own. But
Right.
like coming back with that kind of feeling of like, I don't know, maybe it's not enough, or maybe I haven't achieved enough
Right.
leaving.
Or what they thought
Yeah,
I should have.
exactly. Like proving you should be something. But then I guess I'm speaking from my own experience too. There's just something that shifts where you're like, that's it. Like
This is my
that
experience.
that's it. Like
Yeah.
building the bridges and building this company that we have and like connecting with all of these people and just like doing the work and feeling more confident in it and just kind of like clearing your place and learning and staying hungry, like that's amazing, and that's the
Staying
thing
hungry.
to stay
Yes.
proud of. So glad you feel proud because I'm proud of you.
Lovebug.
Yeah, but I'm asking everybody, what does converge mean to you?
Ooh.
Either it can be the verb converge, it can be converge dance the company, but what does it mean?
Okay. It's funny because earlier today, Amy and I were having a conversation on the train going to rehearsal about, I guess, relationships and connection and fulfillment. It got kind of big. And I told her I was doing some journaling yesterday, and I'm just going to bring it into this because I realized, like, for me, what makes life worth living is connection and love. And that's what I have with you. That's what I have with Amy. I was about to say Jordan or Jordan. I mean, that's what I have with each of you. And that's what we build in this company, aside from, you know, the amazing, meaningful, beautiful, creative, like, work that we attempt to make, produce, perform. It's like it started from like the friendships, and I think like as convergence goes, like the love gets deeper. I'm gonna cry.
I know. I was like, I'm not crying.
I'm not crying. You're crying. I'm not crying. Yeah, it's just like the love gets deeper, and the connection. It's like I realized like and I've never felt this way anyway. I'm not like an island, right? And for me, that's what makes life meaningful is the fact that there is this bridge.
Yeah.
And that I take care of this bridge.
Yeah.
And we take care of it and we support it together. And so that's what converge dance is for me. It's like all these bridges, starting with the three of us, the bridge, and then we went like this. We tangled the bridges. Out. And then HYPHA, we HYPHA'd it.
Yeah.
Now we have like Giovanna and everybody who's in it with us this season and seasons past and coming, you know, like that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Just building this thing.
Yeah, building this thing. And yeah, I guess it's about connection and love ultimately for me.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Thanks for making me cry, Tiff. I love you.
I love you.
You're so blue, still